And welcome everybody, Prophetic Spotlight here. I'm your host, Brother Dan Goodwin. I've got a guest in the studio again today, Brother Michael Samuel Smith. How are you doing, Brother Mike?
Doing very good, Brother Goodwin. Glad to see you again.
All right.
Praise God.
We have already done a show with you, a TV show, and we did an update about the red heifer that folks can watch on YouTube. It's just one back from this one. If you're listening via the radio, we would invite you to go to the website, Prophetic Spotlight, and the YouTube channel is staring right at you when the page opens. And all of our shows and these updates, these radio programs are all there. We would invite you to go there. And Brother Smith's brand new DVD about the second coming of Moses is on our page, and you can get it there. Brother Smith, I want to read a verse here in Numbers, or actually Exodus chapter 19, and this is going to lead into what we're going to discuss today with you. We're going to talk about crossing over Jordan in just a minute here, but it says in verse 11, Exodus 19, and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And somebody actually pointed this out to me on YouTube. He said, hey, I found another verse that proves the 6,000-year earth. And he's exactly right here. In fact, I had this underlined in my Bible when I went and looked at it. I had already seen it. In other words, 2 days is the church age, and then the third day is the kingdom age. Christ comes down. Right. And I think that's a prophetic lesson being taught here in this passage. Kind of goes with your Second Coming of Moses DVD. Yes. And so let's talk about Joshua and the crossing over of Jordan after the 40 years wandering in the wilderness. You got something for us here about that?
Okay, well, I want to start off with the name Joshua. You know, this might come as a surprise to a lot of people. That's not his real name. His real name was Oshia, and you'll find that in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. And in verse 8 and verse 16, it talks about this. So in verse 8 there, it mentions Oshia, the son of Nun of the tribe of Ephraim. And when you go down to Numbers chapter 13, verse 16, might want to make a note of this one. Moses changes the name of Oshia to Yehoshua, which actually is the name of Joshua to us, okay? And you know that's actually the name of Jesus. His Hebrew name is Yeshua, okay? So what's that all about? Why did God have Moses change the name of Oshia to Yeshua, or to Joshua? Well, the reason is when they're going to cross over in the Promised Land, the leader of them, his name will be Joshua, which means the Lord is salvation, by the way. So that is the reason for his name change. So now let's talk about a command that was given to Joshua just before they cross over. The Lord had indicated to Joshua, I want the people to follow, quote, about 2,000 cubits. This is in the book of Joshua, about 2,000 cubits behind the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, well, what's that about? I believe there's a type and shadow that 2,000 cubits represents 2,000 years of the church age. Of course, you remember 2 Peter 3 and 8, a day unto the Lord's like 1,000 years unto a day. And I do believe that's the meaning of that. So anyway, they get ready to cross. The Ark of the Covenant's in the middle of
In other words,
God
Jordan. Goes before us, doesn't he?
That's correct. That's correct. So that is the type and shadow that we see with the church today as far as crossing over.
And when you told me what you wanted to discuss, that's why I read this verse. You know, the 2 days, the third day, of course, third day being the kingdom age, the millennium.
Right.
And I think you're spot on there. I think there's a type there. Every story of the Bible has this kind of stuff. It's
yes.
And when you get studying prophecy like you and I do, you can hardly read anything in the Bible. It just jumps off the page at you.
Right.
I'll never forget the day, and I don't know if I'm the first one that got it. I'm sure I'm not, but I remember the day when I realized that Matthew 17 was in fact prophetic, because it starts off after 6 days.
Yes.
Well, why did God mention it? What did that matter? Why did he say, well, 6 days later? What does that matter to the story? Is he just filling in ink on the page? No. 6 days, a day's worth of the Lord's 1,000 years. After 6 years, he taketh Peter, James, and John. Who do they represent? The church, the saints. Right. He takes them up. What's that mean? Hey, how about the rapture?
Right.
And they're up on the mountain, and then at the rapture, what happens? Two men come down. Their names are Moses and Elijah, and they're shown right there in Matthew 17. Moses and Elijah
Correct.
show up. Peter, James, and John are astonished that they can't believe what they're seeing, and Jesus is transformed before them there, and they spoke together. We don't know what they said. At least the Bible doesn't tell us what they said. And then they leave, and quite a thing. I think God is showing us the future there. I think He's showing us that Moses and Elijah are in fact the two witnesses. It's what I believe. I'm not saying that I'm absolutely right, but it sure looks like in that story that God is telling us who they are, Moses and Elijah, and they show up. After 6,000 years, they come down, we go up. And I joke about we can wave on the way up in the rapture as they come down, because they're going to minister. They're going to minister to Israel. And that's their job. That's their ministry. Speaking of Israel, Brother Mike, let's go ahead and let's talk about Israel. Israel is the key piece of all prophecy, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is the time clock of all prophecy.
You've been over there a lot. Tell us a little bit about it. You talk about the budding of the fig tree, or what is Israel's place? What's it about during the tribulation? What does Israel have to do with all this? You got the temple and all this stuff. It just seems like prophecy revolves around that little nation over there.
Well, it's an example to the world. When we look at the story of Israel, we see the Bible coming alive. It's not by accident that after 2,000 years they became a nation. That was predicted in the Bible. The chances of a nation coming back having the same language, in this case the Hebrew language, I mean, what's the chances of that happening? It's never happened in history before. So that's miraculous right there,
They say that it's the only nation ever that ceased to be a nation, was just scattered and came back and became a nation again.
Right. But I think there's a message for the church. Could I make one comment about that Exodus 19
Sure.
that you made earlier? The whole thing is God's going to show up in 3 days. God is literally going to come down and present Himself to the Hebrew people there at Mount Sinai, and instructs Moses. In fact, He gives them 10 conditions that must be met. They're supposed to wash their clothes. They're supposed to sanctify themselves. In fact, they can't even have relations with one another, men and women, husbands and wives, during that 2 days of preparation. So it's 2 days of sanctification, and then they're going to meet God. Okay, that's the basic idea. Well, actually, there is a parallel to the church in this whole thing, because the 2 days there represents 2,000 years with the church. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity to get right with God, okay, because He's going to show up on the third day. So after 2,000 years, the Lord returns. That's the 2 days. The third day is when the Lord returns at the second advent. Then we have that 1,000-year kingdom. So there is a direct correlation with the Church of Jesus Christ in that.
And of course, the 2 days, the church is supposed to be purifying itself and being ready to be the bride of Christ. And after that second day ends, the groom comes.
Yes.
And comes for the bride. And what a shame that He's coming for a Laodicean age group of people that have turned their back on Him for the most part. But so what's your take on Matthew 24, the budding of the fig tree? Give us the Michael Samuel understanding of that.
I think that Matthew 24, talking about the budding of the fig tree, it's the beginning of the budding, and I believe that came about technically when they took Jerusalem, the city, in the 1967 war. Okay. I think there's a connection with that.
So you're very close to what I say, and I'm not saying I'm right or you're right or you're wrong or I'm wrong. Most Bible prophecy people, especially the old timers years ago, M.R. DeHaan, all them, they say that they claim 1948 as the budding of the fig tree. Some years back, I came to this conclusion. I think it's very similar to what you're talking about.
Yes.
See, we're talking about farming here. We're talking about plants and trees.
Right.
I think that my take is this: in 1948, in May when they became a nation. I think the fig tree took root. And I think, like you do, I think in 1967, what's Israel without Jerusalem? It's nothing. Jerusalem is the city, the holy city of the world. It's where it all happens. I think that fig tree budded, or at least began budding, in 1967. Are you pretty similar to that?
Yeah, and when you see the budding of the fig tree, know that summer is nigh, right?
Yeah.
That's where we are now. But what comes after summer? The fall.
Yeah.
The return of Christ.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think there's another correlation here that, by the way, this is all unscripted, by the way, folks.
I made you do it this way.
That's right. But I think there's a connection here too. Remember when they were going to the Promised Land, all those that left Egypt except for Caleb and Joshua, the original all died en route. The only people that entered the Promised Land were those 20 years and younger, 20 years old and younger, along with Caleb and Joshua. So let's talk about those 20 years old and younger. If you go back in 1948, it was almost 20 years. We're just short by a few weeks maybe to the 67 war, if you think about it.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Well, I think what it means is there is a parallel with that story, and this is the final generation, those that see Jerusalem becoming the capital of Israel. That is the last generation. Yeah. It's not from 1948, it's from 1967. And we're a part of that now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Amen.
well, I'm with you there, brother. And so we got a couple minutes left. The red heifers are there. They've got the red heifer. Most people agree that the temple is pretty much ready, or at least what they need for the inside of the temple, which is the main thing. My goodness, they used to be just skins, right? They don't need a Solomon's temple.
Right.
They just need a place.
Right.
It just seems like Israel is ready for the Lord to come and for them to take their part in prophetic history. Do you see that? Do you believe Israel's pretty much ready?
I think it's a sign to Israel, this red heifer situation. And of course, we've talked about this. There are 5 red heifers last year in 2022, September 2022, that were sent to Israel. And there's 5 there. 1 is disqualified since being there. We still have 16 perfect red heifers.
Right here in Texas.
Right here in Texas, Rockwall, Texas, probably around 30 miles from here. They're still waiting here. So the whole now, the plan in Israel is to sacrifice a perfect red heifer in the spring of 2024, next spring, at Passover, sometime between Passover and Pentecost. So I can give you the dates on that. Actually, Passover next year in 2024, that will end up being April 22nd to April 30th. I would say the probability of them pulling off a perfect red heifer next spring in 2024, it's about 99 out of 100. Yeah. This will happen, but that's a sign to Israel.
Yep.
Pointing to Messiah, ultimately.
All right. Well, God bless you, Brother Smith. Thanks for being with us again today.
Amen.
Folks, we got 2 shows that you can watch on our YouTube channel and about the second coming of Moses with Brother Smith here. And thanks for watching. I hope you're saved. Hope you know Jesus. Hope you're ready, because ready or not, He's coming. Until next time.
Keep your eyes on them skies.
Yes.